Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. This week, joining us is Alberto Gonzalez, CTO of WebRTC Ventures, an old friend of the WebRTC community, open source community too. Thank you for joining us today, Alberto.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you for having me.
So you're the technical side of WebRTC Ventures, with Erin being the more business-oriented side, right?
Yep, yeah, that wasn't always the case. Originally, he was more also involved in the tech side, but I think that's how things have evolved.
So, can you give us a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm originally from Barcelona, Spain. Moved like to Chicago like 7 years ago, to for a master's, and then always was interested in well, I have a telecom background as I'm a telecommunications engineer, and then started to mix that telecom background with software development, which that made WebRTC like a pretty good fit for us. And that's what I've been working on these last like 6 7 years. I mean, I've been touching things more into the telephony world, and some others more into the like web development kind of applications that need real time, could be video, audio, or data. So yeah, that's me.
You're probably in the minority, as most people in the WebRTC area, since it's so overlapping with web technology and general development, most of the people in the area, like myself, went through computer engineering and then went into telecoms, not the reverse, right? There's
Yeah, I did the opposite path. Yeah, actually, I liked a lot like the networking side of things, like more like the a bit more networks originally. But then yeah, I found out that well, I'm not like the best coder, like I'm not like a great programmer, but I can hack things through, and eventually I learn a bit. But yeah, I follow kind of the opposite path of what would be more standard computer science, WebRTC.
well, telecoms are very often a networking problem first. To be honest, it's very starts. The rest is usually pretty standard, I would say. So,
Yeah.
what are the main projects you've been working on recently? I know you do a lot of exciting stuff, so I'm always curious to ask you.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, there are quite a bit. Uh, I don't know which one could be more interesting for the audience. There are some more standard projects, like you could think of call center type of applications, but a modern type of call center. So like we had the old school type where you have the IVR, you press one, and all that kind of flow that still exists, of course. But yeah, we are building others that maybe have video embedded in the zip calls, so that's a bit more challenging.
Mm.
Also, we added in some of them. We have done in the past some analytics on the transcriptions for finding patterns, like keyword detection based on the
Oh, nice.
conversations. So that's something we have done, and also integrating WebRTC with zip. So having dial-in functionalities, dial-out, like could be here having someone call in and have hot, like hot transfers or warm transfers, like just moving people around. And so that's more like a probably like a standard type of project you could think about, but I think that's quite fun because it involves a lot of stuff and there is a lot that can be done there. And there are others that are more like yeah, they sound a bit more fun. Maybe like we built some live streaming type of application that combined quizzes in the application. So it was, I don't know if you're familiar with HQ Trivia. Um,
Not really. So, what's that?
yeah, it's well, it's not the application we built, but that's pretty famous one. It's just like a live broadcast that happens every day for a set amount of time, like 15 minutes, and people is able to participate and answer some questions. And if you answer right all the questions until the end, you get a prize. So that
Nice.
that you can imagine creates a lot of engagement, like especially if the person that is talking is um, like is famous or knows how to make things fun. And yeah, we did that for baseball fields. So you know, you have the jumbo tron, the jumbo cam. So we built that feature where you were able to appear in the jumbo cam with your phone and be able to see your face and be able to answer the questions also while all the faces appear in a grid in the jumbo cam. So yeah, I think that was a pretty fun one.
Nice, yeah. It's always like nice to see applications that sort of go into the real life, so to say. So it's just you're at the stadium, and there's it's a different way of thinking. So there's one important thing, since you're the technical and the telecom person here. I think a lot of the trouble with WebRTC applications is not the first call, it's scale. Like getting your app to sort of do what it's supposed to do. It doesn't really take long, to be fair. You follow a tutorial, you install FreeSwitch, you install
That's
Janus,
true.
and wire up some JavaScript. Good, I've got it. Great, perfect. Then you try to run 10 calls and it catches fire. So it is. So what are the scaling challenges, and what are the best ways to solve them if you're starting to grow?
Yeah, that's pretty challenging because you know, like if you have like a e-commerce site or this type of more standard web applications that are in real time, you can just have 10 servers with
Yeah,
a
more
that
servers.
have a single more servers, a single database, and it doesn't really matter if I go to server 1 or server 5, like they are going to this, I'm going to get the same, and it doesn't need to be real time. If there is some delay connecting, that also is not a problem. But yeah, the challenges scaling WebRTC applications, one of them is really like being able to all connect in the same server, because basically the server is the one distributing the traffic. So we need to be able to connect to that same server, or be able to have the servers connected between them. So there are these two approaches. So you could make sure that any traffic I should see, I would be getting. And one way
Mhm.
is to just make sure I always go to the same server and you also go to the same server. So those are details that you need to take care in advance, and make sure also you are doing that. So it's also about adding servers, but there is this additional layer where you need to be careful of connecting to the right server, the one that
Yeah,
is
you're right.
probably closer to you. Also is another important factor, because yeah, like again, like doing a HTTP request that takes, I don't know, 400 milliseconds or 800 milliseconds is not that big of a deal. But if it's like video,
Mhm.
it's a big deal. If it's all the time, there is a lag of 800 milliseconds versus 400. So you can notice the difference continuously. So
I
yeah,
yeah, the one other thing that I really feels weird to me, but there's probably a reason. None of the WebRTC open source projects have easy, or at least easy to implement clustering mode. Like none of them has the ability to distribute traffic across. There's something that maybe we should just sit down and do.
yeah. I think the I mean, I'm really glad that many of them like open source. So that's awesome that they open that those projects. But yeah, it's true that all of them are, yeah, you know exactly how to do it for a single server, but then when you need to scale that, it's not really clear. Some of them have documentation, or there are some ideas on how to do it, but yeah, it's, I think there are some more like newer ones, like now there is like LiveKit, that's more, I would say, like recent. They are more focused into that, and I think they are starting to add some documentation on how to do that part of clustering. But it's still like, yeah, I don't think it's like click to deploy and it's all like working right now. Yeah, I think that would be a good project. Maybe we can create
I
like a
think
starter
so.
kit for it.
There's a few ways to approach it. First, which is more suited to clustering with Camelio, all of the other stuff, because it's more traditional as a structure. While for Janus and Pion, you could probably just build the module in it, especially Pion. It's super easy to hack in it, and I've been playing around, and I really like that project.
Yeah, yeah, that's one
So,
that we have started experimenting, but
oh
we haven't
yeah,
done much yet. So it's probably in the plan of this year
it's
to learn
super
a bit
clean,
more
super
about it.
small. It's really this the core is super small. It's really well written. Speaking of which, well, since you design and develop a lot of your projects, what are your favorite tools? Like what are your solutions usually written in languages, platforms, whatnot? What's the
Hmm.
most common case?
Yeah, I think, I mean, in general, our stack is JavaScript. So we like
Front and
it's
back?
kind of front and back in Node.js. Like that's very easy to use, no? For like backend and front end. That's our preference. Of course, yeah, there are other projects we might be using Java, Python, if it's something Python perhaps more for kind of these bash script type of operations, or for capturing some data or doing some transformation of data periodically, some specific side things. But yeah, mostly Java and JavaScript. There is there are others. I think there are exceptions. Others are Ruby on Rails, and maybe one in Go. But yeah, most of it is that, and front end React. That's the framework we use for front end development. In terms of tools, really like tools that we use for like working with WebRTC, I think there are some interesting testing tools. Some are paid, some are open source. We use in the past something called Kite for load testing. We have also other very well-known tools for networking that are actually useful for troubleshooting. Are like capturing commands like TCP dump to get all those logs, and Wireshark, which is like the packet analyzer. So those are, I think, pretty common for more getting more into the details of maybe a
Mhm.
specific bug. WebRTC internals also is not a tool, but more like a functionality that Google has, Chrome has.
For sure. And yeah, two questions. One is how do you test applications? Like, what's your favorite testing framework? What's even the process? Testing WebRTC is super known standard. Like everybody has their own idea how to make sure things work. So I always ask this, like, how do you test your WebRTC applications?
Yeah, I mean, there is always the part that is just code that you can unit test as you would do in a web application, using something like Jest, something like that. But that won't cover it. Yeah, that would be just to make sure at least some minimum is there. But there are some things that for testing WebRTC, you need to focus also on load testing, and also interoperability testing. You want to make sure your because you can support multiple browsers, and browsers doesn't behave quite the same. So one first phase is manual test, of course, but you do that interoperability manually. So you make sure, yeah, Chrome to Firefox, Firefox to Chrome, all these combinations. But then you can automate that, and that's where like this tool I was mentioning is quite useful. It's called Kite. Um, and then there are other paid ones. I think there is one called Loadero, another one called TestRTC, that are basically like SaaS platforms that will simulate Chromium users joining your call. That, of course, is something that you can do on your end, like without SaaS platforms. And we have used something called WebDriver.io for it. So we have used that for, yeah, simulating or Puppeteer. So they spin up basically Chromium instances, and you can simulate having many users, and you can grab the stats of that, and be able to decide like how good the call was, and And yeah, so that there could be that could be embedded in your CI/CD pipeline. So you deploy, you run this basic load test and verify if things improved or stay the same or got worse.
Yeah, for sure. And tied into that, what's your infrastructure typically like? Do you run Docker? Do you run Kubernetes? A little bit of both. I'm mostly interested about Kubernetes because I keep getting, some people say it's great, some people say we don't use it at all, and most people are in the middle, which is probably the real answer.
Yeah, I think kind of in the middle. I mean, I could imagine there is some performance impact. That's something we really haven't measured very in detail. Like some people say, yeah, like the real hardware is going to perform better than using like a Kubernetes cluster with all the services on top of it. I won't argue against it. It could be true, but it also brings a lot of benefits to have it. So we have, in general, we will use Kubernetes if possible,
Hmm,
or use cloud services that basically work on using Kubernetes at the end. Um, so yeah, like we would use some cloud service that also simplifies some of this work, but it behaves in a very similar way to Kubernetes, which is running Docker, which Docker for sure is something we have in all our projects. And yeah, Kubernetes, if it's something on premises,
hmm.
probably we will use it because you cannot leverage cloud services. But if we use, like, let's say Google, AWS, Azure, or some of those, we would use wherever they provide and use things like Terraform for
Oh,
writing templates that kind of define how the infrastructure needs to look like. So yeah,
nice.
that's yeah. And in
Terraform is another tool that I'm hearing a lot recently.
Yeah, I think that is working pretty well for us, especially if you want to replicate past infrastructures. In general, they don't change a lot. At least some of the basics are usually the same. There is a front end, there is a back end. So at least you can leverage some of it, and you already can start the service right away and then add the modifications you need for this new project. But some of those things are already working, so it makes things easier. Especially, I think it's very helpful for us as a service company, to be able to have these templates and have well defined how this infrastructure looks like in a it forces you to document actually your infrastructure.
Yeah, that's very that is very important because honestly, the main problem I find in our jobs is not even getting so when you're a senior, you know what you're doing, is not even getting things to work, but it's remembering how you did it a year from now because it's
Correct. That's
you
the
come back
hardest
to
part.
yeah, this application has worked perfectly for a year. Great. It's very complicated. Got a lot of event management. I have a former consulting customer now that we're with SignalWire who has a very complicated webinar platform which has a real time quizzes and recording and playback and issues certificates based on your presence, so they have to check if events when you join, etc. And I didn't touch it for a year or something because it was working. Then we had to make some changes and I don't even know how it runs. I had to go read
Yeah.
everything from the start. Like, is this Docker, not Docker? It took me a while. It is, yeah, it's important to document. Well, it's also important to be out there in the community. And I know you do something that's very interesting. You were the chair for the WebRTC and real-time application track for the real-time communications conference, the IEEE conference in Illinois. So, can you give us some news about that? Like, it sounds so interesting. What were the most interesting takeaways from there?
Yeah, I think it's a like I believe it's the first conference that officially talked or focused on WebRTC and real-time applications. So it's a pretty old conference, like has been there before I was in the field, I believe. And um, I think it's pretty cool because you can connect with people from many different backgrounds. So it combines academia with also people in the business, no? So you can talk maybe with people that is doing PhDs in schools related to real-time communications, but also with people that is, you know, working in a daily basis, like in companies that need real time. So I think, yeah, it's a great conference that happens, yeah, every year. We don't have still the details this year, but I'm pretty sure it will happen again. Usually in September, October uh, of this year, we will
Well, I'm
probably
going to
have the
send in a
conference.
paper.
Nice, that would be awesome. Yeah, yeah, it's a pleasure. I mean, I've been presenting there since 2015, 2016. That's actually how I met Arin, the CEO of WebRTC Ventures. And then uh, after, yeah, several years being involved, like I've been fortunate enough to be the chair, so that's quite fun because also you can directly meet the speakers, no? So it gives you an extra chance to speak one to one with everyone and also ask your questions. Well, you know about it. Doing this ClueCon weekly as well, like you
Yeah.
can
Yeah, it's a great.
satisfy your
That's the
curiosity.
best thing. That's the best thing. Yeah, you can ask questions both on the call and off the call. Just to,
Yeah,
if you know, well, I always wanted to ask you this thing, and now you
yeah.
can. Yeah, it's great. That's why I love conferences, and I think so. Is that WebRTC conference in person or was it remote? Is it going to be in person? How does it
Yes,
work?
it was always in person until obviously COVID. So the last 2 years has been have been in remote, full remote. And I don't know what we will do this year. I'm guessing the plan will be to have something hybrid or to have something in person, since like things now are a bit like I would say we are done with the pandemic, hopefully. But yeah, uh, we'll see. I don't have any specific details yet. Probably in a month or two we will start discussing, and yeah, we will publish it in the Twitter and other accounts that the RTC conference have.
Very nice. Yeah, we went back to full in person with ClueCon last year. Like, was the first one full in person after a while, and but we've kept the streaming going. The more organized streaming and all the stuff that we all used to do with the full remote conferences, and we had a lot of people watching as a result. So I think some kind of remote is going to stay. Feels like people have learned that they can watch conferences if they cannot. I mean, attending in person is always better, but people have
Yeah,
learned they can watch conferences, which used not to be the case. So it's what I remember, and you probably know what FOSDEM is, the super large
yep,
open source gathering in Brussels. I'll go up there and say hello to a few friends next week, actually. But it's there used to be that you had like 10 people watching the streams. Now there's 300, 400 on the smallest dev room talk about something that's super obscure and only people who go to FOSDEM know. So FOSDEM is weird.
yeah,
It's a true open source gathering. Like, it's people without shoes up there. That's how open source it is. And there's a lot more people watching from afar. So really, WebRTC is part of it. Like, we all watch through WebRTC. There's no
yeah,
it's really super interesting. So maybe the next step in WebRTC scaling, especially, is going to be figuring out how we do super large audiences, which is not truly solved at the WebRTC level, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. No, I think there are still some challenges, and I mean there are different ones. No, can be for the broadcast, no, to be able to stream to thousands, and there is the other one which is more about like the kind of group large or ultra large
Mm-hmm.
group calls where you want to see everyone
Oh yeah, that's
and you
different.
want to have like 200 people in the group call. That's also a different challenge, but also still a challenge where right now the solution is, well, we display you 20 people and then you can scroll and keep refreshing the others, like this is the type of solution today is available. But really, if you want to see like 200 people at the same time in the screen, is really not possible today without some maybe magic by showing just the pictures instead of showing really the real-time video.
Yeah, I feel like with how important it is to have low latency video in a lot of settings, that WebRTC could really be a factor in, well, conferences, any kind of broadcast. But getting past 1,000 viewers only, just people who are watching, like me and you are chatting, but there's another 1,000 people watching. I don't think it's easy. Like getting past that 1,000 people is really, really hard.
Yeah.
SignalWire has a good broadcasting product that we've been working on, and we can do a couple thousand viewers working pretty well. It's not exploding the servers, but it's not the scale you need to do a broadcast of the Super Bowl, right? You need a
Oh yeah.
billion. You need a billion channels. There are no CDNs, or I think that's an unsolved issue. And always feel like there's a product somewhere, and there's a product in there. Like just finding a way to do WebRTC distribution at scale.
Yeah, I think it goes through like some of the companies working on this. Probably one of the solutions would be really owning the whole network. Like if you
Oh
you
yeah,
have,
you're right.
if you have the whole infrastructure, you manage the pipes. you then know if you could be able to handle it. But if you don't and you depend on the public internet, then you have that challenge of like, yeah, my servers can handle it, but the network cannot. So that's also an issue, no? Like if you have like 1,000 people in your company and they are all connecting from the same building, 1,000 streams HD, that's a challenge.
Yeah, it is. I don't know. There's a bunch. I think the fact that there's a lot of standards, but not really one standard for WebRTC is making things even more complicated, because you could figure out a way to have a large scale distribution tool that only works with Janus, but then it doesn't work for. There's WIP now. WIP might be the solution there.
Yeah, for broadcasting, I think that's a very interesting protocol that was proposed like last year, I think, and the idea of WIP is pretty cool. Like to be able to not use the whole like a libWebRTC application and be able to just sending HTTP, call an API, and be able to send a broadcast. That's pretty powerful. That's going to simplify a lot this case, this one to many kind of flows. And I think some companies are starting to look at it. I don't know, there were some large ones already implementing it, this WIP and web in their solutions. I don't recall now which one specifically, but yeah, they are already starting to add that.
Nice. Yeah, I think WIP especially is coming up quite frequently. WEP is a bit newer, and it's a bit
Yeah.
more. It's a companion protocol, but I'm not even sure that's going to be a factor for a while, because you need to build clients, and people are slow at building clients. They're
Yeah.
happy with what they have for the most part. Well, Alberto, thank you very much for joining us today. It was a great chat as usual.
Yeah, nice to talk to you also, Luca.
And since you live in Chicago, look into joining us at ClueCon this year. It's going to be live in August, and why not come say hello? It's
Yep, I
going
was
to be
looking
great.
into it actually. Maybe I even submit some paper to present.
Of course, please do. Cool. So, well, thank you very much, Alberto, for joining us today. Alberto Gonzalez, CTO of WebRTC Ventures. And for the rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you. Bye.
And goodbye, everybody.